You think you know how the world works? You think that this material universe is all there is? But what if I told you the reality you know is one of many?
This doesn't make any sense.
You have found yourself another tasty talk fest with the Film Board for the next reel on rashpixel.fm. My name is JJ, and today I come to you in a cold November rain, huddled under an umbrella with a gang of thugs to spoil a movie new this week in theaters. Tonight we will find out if it's for the better or for the worse that we're returning to the Marvel Cinematic Universe with a wild ride of visual effects in Doctor Strange. Now, knowing what I know about these blokes, we should have a diverse range of opinions on this show, so let me introduce you to them. First, our Sorcerer Supreme, Pete Wright.
My magical fetish weapon is a duck.
Our mystical majordomo, Steve Sarmento.
While watching this film, it just feels so good.
Our all-in-all lover of fake things, Tommy Handsome.
I look forward to challenging you all to a spark fight.
Learn more about the Film Board and this silly show at thenextreel.com. Also, it is possible to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, and we would totally dig it if you'd join us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram at The Next Reel. Any ratings, reviews, and comments you can add help us greatly by helping more citizens of the multiverse find our show. So for this deal and for our entrance into the multiverse, I want to go a bit upside down because of the fakeness of all of it, and I think it's important that we sort out the differences between Kamar-Taj, Dormammu, and Agamotto, not Agamemnon. So, Tommy, you're good with names. Tell us what you learned.
I giggled a lot during this movie. There were times that reminded me of Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings / mostly Hobbit stuff, where there's just people very seriously looking at someone else and saying, we've got to stop this random bunch of syllables. So that was, I was very confused normally about who they were talking about. Overall, this was a movie I was kind of dreading. This seemed like the most fake of fake in the Marvel Universe past Thor, but I actually liked it a lot more than I thought I would. That being said, I have no need to ever see it again. For instance, when I saw the last Captain America, what was it called? Step up to the streets. Captain America, Step Up to the Streets. I immediately wanted to see that set piece that took place at the airport when they were all flying around. We talked about that on the podcast. For me, there was nothing like that here. But
Sharks and the Jets, yeah.
The Sharks and the Jets, yeah. But I liked it much more than I thought I should, or than I thought I would, and that's a credit to the makers.
Well, that's awesome. And did you actually like the spark fights?
I did like the spark fights. I thought they were really cool. I was ready to laugh a lot, like when people in the Harry Potter movies point sticks at each other and say kablamo or whatever they say. I usually lose interest. This kind of stuff, the way that they were drawing symbols and pulling weapons from the air, I kind of dug.
Who is it? I feel like I have known you, Tommy, for a long time, and we're not young men, but why is it when we talk about movies like this, you sound so much more old than I am?
Because I want all the wizards to get off my lawn. I don't know. At some point, I really just changed as far as CGI and that kind of stuff. I like it when it's grounded. There's a lot of really, really smart CGI in this, fake things running on fake things that I really appreciated. There's a lot of nonsense. I think that just because we can doesn't mean we should. And this movie's better, way better than it could have been, but we still have a lot to learn.
Do you think there was a film that was a tipping point for you in terms of CGI?
Toy Story. Ugh, fake. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I'm not exactly sure.
Well, maybe we'll get back to you later in the
Okay,
show
great.
about that. Steve, how about you? I would assume your opinion is somewhat different.
Yeah, I have to say with Doctor Strange, Marvel really continued its trend of telling compelling human stories through a superhuman, or in this case, supernatural character and plot and story. So I thought it just did a really nice job of giving me a interesting character arc within this origin story, which I know we'll probably talk about. But again, it's really a case of here's an interesting character that's facing an interesting dilemma, and then we're layering all the other magical, supernatural things on it. But if we strip that all away, I think we still have an interesting conflict that Stephen Strange is faced with, and how he's going to get to the other side of where he needs to be. So for me, I just thought it was a nice continuation of, as we've talked about, different sort of genre films within this Marvel Cinematic Universe.
That's cool. That's cool. And I think that's interesting, too, because of that a lot of people are worried about things becoming stale with Marvel. So that's interesting for us to look at with this. How about you, Pete? How did it hit you?
It is one of my very favorite things in the world when I come to a show like this and agree so rightly with Steve. I really enjoyed.
Nice.
Yay! I really found myself enjoying this, and I think it's because I went in with the expectation that this was going to be a movie that was made for the effects. That I was going to be wowed by the bigness of it and the color and the wavy things and the animated things. And that anything layered on top of that happened to involve real people was going to be just kind of icing on the cake. And in this case, what they delivered through Doctor Strange and through Benedict Cumberbatch is actually a very human story, right? It's a story of recovery. It's a story of not just physical recovery, but social recovery and ego recovery and learning to actually live in the world with people again. And they do it through this lens of the fantastic and of the spiritual, and they get to talk about chakras and energy flow and all that. But in the end, it ends up being just a means to a discussion of what it means for this man to heal himself in the world, in the very real world. And I actually found myself quite attached to it.
That's awesome. And I think the effects thing is really key. I think obviously because of the nature of this movie, we're going to talk about that a lot today. And I think Tommy's comments earlier make sense with that too. For me, we talk about origin stories becoming kind of the way of the world for Marvel, and this was an origin story, but I got lost in liking this movie, which I think was really cool for me. I compare it a lot to Ant-Man, which sounds strange. I don't know that they hit things well in the script in terms of the writing and dialogue. I think that was really one of the strengths of Ant-Man. But as far as the effects, I was really bought into it. I didn't care necessarily that there was any sort of tired trope from an origin story. That the Marvel formula might have been in play here, but I totally was separated from it. I didn't notice. I was along for the ride, and I liked the portrayal of the person, and I love the things you said, Pete, about the spiritual sort of reinvention and the resolution that the human character brought to this story, and I think that was great. I think they melded the effects with that really, really well. For me, I challenged myself a bit when I came to this movie because I was a comic book collector when I was younger, and I thought about the fact that everyone is coming to these comic book movies right now, and they're thinking that we're seeing an origin story every time, and we're being reintroduced, and we're doing this sort of thing. But when I was collecting comic books, I was collecting a lot of different titles, and I came into new stories a lot of times and never really felt like I needed or I felt tired about being reintroduced to a character. That never was something that bothered me. That was something that Stan Lee did every time you came to a new character, is he had a little blurb at the beginning of each comic that said, this is this character, and this is how he got his power, and this is the sort of thing. And now I think it's interesting because when at one point Image Comics came up, and I don't know if you guys know which ones Image Comics are, but that's like Spawn, if you remember the Spawn movies and things
absolutely,
like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And in about the early 90s, the Image Comics came out, and it was a whole bunch of artists and writers, Todd McFarlane being one of them, Rob Liefeld being one of them, that broke off from the sort of mainstream comic titles and created titles that they wanted to do on their own. And they didn't have any sort of episodes. They didn't have any sort of standard monthly releases, but everything was an introduction to a new title. And there were about, I would say, maybe 7 to 10 titles that were that way. And all of them were origin stories, but we weren't tired then either. So I really challenged myself to come to this movie and say, do I like it on its merit, or is the formula sticking out to me? And I was super impressed. I thought it jumped out at me in a way that I hadn't expected, and in a way that was special for me in terms of a movie too. So I'm really excited to hear what you guys think in terms of that.
You know what, JJ? My thoughts, just to glom onto that briefly. One of the things I found specifically around the origin story is this movie felt incredibly efficient in ingesting Doctor Strange into the universe, and I think it's through an engaging visual story. It was an engaging human story with the accident and the first post-credit stinger, I think that made me want to see the next Thor movie immediately, and it felt like such a natural connection to have Benedict Cumberbatch in there. It was obvious, it was on the nose, and yet I still wanted to be a part of that right after this movie ended.
I totally agree, and they've managed the cliffhanger better than they have in a lot of the sort of, as well as they did way back when you saw Nick Fury first introduce himself to Iron Man. I felt like that was the first one
on the
I
big
loved
donut.
That one, yeah, exactly. And now since then, I haven't seen one that I liked. It always felt like a novelty, and now I'm back on board with it. So.
Both of these stingers, I think, were absolutely perfect for the film and much better than the recent set.
So, and that gets into the writing, right? So how did you guys feel about that? One thing, I think it's different from Ant-Man. I brought up Ant-Man as the one because of the way that it's written, but I think that it still has that tone. How did you guys like the way that everything was written?
Number one, about the character of Doctor Strange, they didn't really give me a reason to really care about him or want him to be better, other than just sort of this weird anti-hero save the cat. Like, he's rude, he's arrogant and stuff, but he's really good at what he does. That's not enough for me sometimes, so I kind of didn't really care that much about him.
What point in the story? Because I found myself thinking about that as well, because he comes across, he's very arrogant. I was talking with my brother about this.
He texts while driving.
He texts while driving, but he also said, I wonder if Benedict Cumberbatch approached this role and said, let's see, I'll just do this like Greg House. I'm going to be a British doctor. I'm a British actor playing an arrogant American doctor. And I think Cumberbatch made it his own. He brings a different piece to it. But how do you make that person likable? Because in a TV series, you've got more time. You can do different things on House. Here, we've got to have a reason to start to care about him. We have to become invested in him somehow. Otherwise, they've lost us as an audience, and we're not going to care about the stakes of anything that happens because, he's just an arrogant, selfish, jerk. We don't care what happens to him. So where did you find yourself starting to get invested in him as a person and sort of starting to care or sympathize with him a little bit more?
I honestly, it's a nice comparison for me, not being comic book movies Magoo, to Tony Stark. Tony Stark, I believe, starts off as Iron Man as a jerk who loves war and all this kind of stuff. It really, for me, comes down to, maybe I haven't thought it through enough, but it comes down to the actor.
Interesting.
It comes down to what the actor himself or herself brings to me, as far as able to, even though you kind of find them despicable, you kind of still want them to like you if you were there, and they're kind of the best at what they do, and there's this cool kind of arrogance. That's what it was for me, is that I really like Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, and I liked Brendan Cumberbatch. All right, I'm gonna say this differently every single time. I can't do it. Benedict Cumberbatch as this, because there is something, even past what I just said, there is something attractive about that character, but it's very hard to find the right kind of actor to do it. So, Steve, it's not the answer you wanted, but that's kind of the best answer I can get.
So my thing about Cumberbatch is that I think he's different from Robert Downey Jr. in this, because the interesting thing that I find about Robert Downey Jr. and actors like that is that I kind of fall in love with them as I watch them, and and like you said, Tommy, you want them to like you, right? Like you like that character, you like his wit and all that stuff.
It's kind of the coolest guy in the room.
Yeah, and I don't think Benedict Cumberbatch did that, and I don't think he necessarily does that. I don't think that's who he is as an actor, but I do think that I respect what he does so much as it goes through that I end up respecting the character. It's such a weird sort of like thin line to make, but for me,
no, but that
exists.
Makes a lot of sense. That's different because Tony Stark is a little bit of a people pleaser. When we meet him in the army truck,
right?
He's sort of like throwing out little jabs and negging people, but he's also a comedian and is also a people pleaser. Okay, interesting.
And I don't think Cumberbatch delivered the comedy lines well. That's one thing that I think. I think, when you're talking about the script, I think there was humor in it, but I don't think it was funny. The only time that I actually laughed, jumping ahead to spoilers, is when Wong finally laughed at the end. That I thought that was clever, but every other joke I thought was as flat as it was delivered, and no one got there. And I think that's something that's different about Benedict Cumberbatch from Robert Downey Jr.
Benedict Cumberbatch's jokes, or Dr. Stephen Strange's jokes, none of his jokes were funny. And that felt very much like a character thing to me, and not a missed mark in the script, but that this guy is a guy we don't like. The thing that connected me back to Steve's question is that he is, it is a very human tragedy, unlike Robert Downey Jr. or Iron Man's tragedy, right? He is captured and blown up, and he is put in this cave where he has to build a giant robot. Immediately, that is an inhuman tragedy. That's not the kind of thing that happens to normal people, but we absolutely know people who have been in tragic car accidents, and the moment he opens his eyes, as much as I hate him as a human, I find him an egotistical maniac. I'm not attracted to him as a human being. I know he serves an important role in the universe as a brilliant surgeon. I get it. But as soon as he opens his eyes and realizes his hands have been destroyed, I begin feeling for him, because I know that he has a long road to recovery. And it's not just the physical road and the fact that he's lost his career. That's a very human loss. It's the spiritual loss of learning to adjust and adapt to a new world. And that, I think, is an important transformational moment. And I think Cumberbatch actually handles that really well.
And I think that's why I like this more than what we saw in Ant-Man, because it's one of those sort of really, I want to say tangible, but that's not the right word. It's a tangible feeling of spirit that all of us can relate to, whereas in Ant-Man, it was more of a redemption story, right? So they did two things in the film that sort of put you in with with Stephen Strange as he goes through this. As the crash is happening, you see him literally punch through the dash. And that is the first part where I said, oh gosh, here it happens. And then as he's in his recovery bed, they have the first person shot, and they go back to it a couple times.
So
of him
gross.
looking out at his hands in suspension. And those two things speak exactly to what you're talking about, Pete. They say, this is you. You are Stephen Strange. What are you going to do now? And no matter how much you disliked him at the beginning, and this is what Benedict Cumberbatch does so well, is he's going to be consistent. He's going to be throughout, and you're going to see him portraying this character. He's going to embody it, and I think he did a great job of that. And what the filmmakers did here is they put you there. So you could hate him and you could dislike him, but all of a sudden you're considering yourself as him. And that he wasn't the cat that needed saving. The cat that needed saving was something else. It was Earth. It was that sort of thing. But we were on the ride with him to save that cat. And I think it was really smart how they did it in this movie.
I'm gonna challenge you guys a little bit on this, and I'm gonna tell you why. So yes, there's the physical loss that he has, and we see that, but that doesn't change him at all, because we see that he's pursuing solution after solution. He's thrown all his money because he still thinks he's going to regain that. And yes, that's frustrating, but it hasn't changed him. He's still an arrogant guy that thinks the world is his, that things should go his way. And it hasn't changed anything in his character. When he is in the Sanctum Sanctorum trying to save it the first time, and he gets the cape and he captures, and I'm going to call him Smoky Eyes Mikkelsen, Mads Mikkelsen, so that Tommy knows who I'm talking about.
Thank
but
you.
for those of us that pay attention to proper nouns, it's Caecilius, who is
That
one of
took you three
these rogue
times to
agents.
pronounce correctly. Let's
They
go
have-
with Smoky Eyes.
Smoky Eyes Mikkelsen. So they have this conversation, and Stephen Strange is asking him about what he's trying to do, and he talks about this dark overlord and all these things and all these promises. And Strange says, you're killing these people. And he basically says, well, what does the death of one or two people matter when there's this larger thing at stake? And then I immediately went back to walking in the halls with, Stephen Strange and Dr. Palmer. And he has just pulled that bullet out, and she's like, you need to be in here. He's like, no, I have bigger things to do. I'm going to be doing things that save the world. I'm not going to be spending time in the emergency room just saving one or two people when I could be fixing much larger things. And to me, in that moment, I saw in him this reflection of he's seen his counterpart, of somebody else that is looking big picture. And for me, that's where there was a big pivot in he's realizing that could be me.
Yep.
And he's going to turn now. And to me, that's where I started to see the transformation in Stephen Strange, because it stopped being about his ego and he stopped thinking about big picture of I'm so important I can save the world, but to what end? Where is he going?
I love it. I don't think that's a challenge. I think that's another aspect.
Feels absolutely in line with me too.
It's going with it. I agree, and I think it's just another astral projection in the script, right? It's using that physical vehicle to show each of those people what their mirror universe reflection is showing them. I think they did those things really well.
Can I ask a question? And this is, I think it's for probably Tommy and Steve.
That's me!
Because I'm pretty sure I know how JJ falls on this. So, Scott Derrickson is mostly known for horror stuff, right?
Oh, really?
And
I don't know who he is.
He's the director.
I got that
this
part.
Film.
But,
You got that part?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
Tommy,
So
he did Sinister.
Sinister,
Oh.
Devil's Knot, Deliver Us from Evil, Sinister 2, and
Exorcism
of Emily Rose.
I like two of those movies very much.
Okay, can you talk about that?
And which two? We'll never know. Wait.
I just wonder. I wonder two things. First of all, from what you know of his work, how did he land this thing? And two, do you see any, is there a stamp, or does this get to the directors don't matter in the Marvel Universe trope?
With the Exorcism of Emily Rose, it's a subversion of the traditional exorcism film. It's actually becomes. Has anyone else seen it other than me?
Nope.
Not
in the world? It's a courtroom thriller, and it tells a very straightforward exorcism story like you've seen in other films, while then also showing it under the guise of, no, she was actually just incredibly sick, and here are medical reasons why all of these crazy, seemingly supernatural things could have happened to this poor girl.
Oh, interesting.
And so it was just a smart way. It wasn't another exorcism film. It was this constant back and forth of how do you explain, what do you believe in, all of that kind of stuff. So I guess with some of the subversion, I might be reaching a little bit, and we can talk about them later, some of the tropes that happen in this movie where I usually check out, there was imagination put to them. Especially like the big bad, the fight with the big baddie, all that kind of stuff, which is usually when I'm done with comic book films. There was so much imagination. It's like he wasn't ready. He and his co-writers weren't ready to just be and now's the time when we do this. They were kind of let's subvert it. Let's try to find out what's interesting about this.
Well, and I think we see that in these articles that people have been mentioning with Derrickson, is that he wanted to take the things that seem straightforward about comic book movies, about those kind of things, and really look at them from a different lens. And he's doing that in different ways. I applaud him for that, really.
Well, he's, was kind of interested in why, somebody that does horror films would transition to something like this, and that, not being a big fan of the horror genre, I just did a little bit of, digging around on this guy, and it was surprised and intrigued to find out so that he's a Christian who likes to make movies that tackle heavy spiritual themes. And in his there's an interview with him, and they point to some posts on his Twitter account when I guess he first got signed on to Doctor Strange. He posted some artwork, sort of, I guess, some concept art with Doctor Strange with some quotes. One is, "Who has a harder fight than he who is striving to overcome himself?" And I guess a quote from actually one of the Doctor Strange comics, which is, "I know what it is to sink to the depth, to be on bended knee before God, screaming for deliverance." Doctor Strange. So I think it's from what I've read out of a couple interviews, for him, it's really that, the challenge of, good versus evil, and man's role in that, and which side do we take, and how do we rise to that occasion? How do we have to draw on something other than our own internal strength to help us overcome those things? And in this case, it's, the spells, the magic, and his knowledge of everything outside of what he knows, because he thinks he knows everything. And that's what he learns very quickly, is there's a much larger universe out there that he knows nothing about. And he's going to have to sort of forget everything about himself and sort of surrender to all these other things before he's going to have the strength to take on this challenge.
That is interesting also, because I'm really, and listeners, please join us on Snapchat. I don't know, what are we on? I'm having trouble connecting any of that to the Sinister films. If he directed the first two Sinister films, the only two Sinister, I can't, other than man being not believing that there is a supernatural, but there's a very little of any of what you just said in the Sinister films. That's interesting.
Oh, okay.
Well, and how interesting is it that there is a Christian that is writing and directing Doctor Strange, which is about manipulating dark magic and the occult
Right.
to save the world? I think, they were talking when the Harry Potter franchise was wild and active about how much that sort of flouted in the face of Christianity, and I think it's really interesting that this person, that Derrickson, was able to kind of take his belief and really sort of structure it in a way that is talking about a Christian way to approach a comic book story. I don't know, that's terribly interesting to me, and thank you for finding that information, Steve.
Oh no, there were two things in the film that really, having that background knowledge, I could sort of track certain pieces in the film, and one is the whole concept of whoever seeks to preserve his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will keep it. And the idea of how he's going to actually win at the end is he's got to die repeatedly. He's got to lose. The only way he can win is by losing. And then the other quote,
sacrificing himself.
yes,
right.
exactly. And the other was there's a pastor out of California that has a very popular book. Rick Warren wrote a book called The Purpose Driven Life, and the first line in that book is, "It's not about you." And that is what the Ancient One says to him. There's one lesson you still haven't learned. And he's like, "What is it?" And she looks him right in the face and says, "It's not about you." And to me, those were two sort of, I guess, signifiers for people that may be aware of those things, may sort of clue in on them, but it's not something that I felt was like in your face. But I thought it's one of those things that I like to see, that is a little thread that you can tease out to sort of pull some themes together if you pay attention.
The only clear image we get of after the car accident, it's all that woozy point of view, not point of view thing, is when he's being operated on, he is clearly in a Christ pose.
Oh, yeah. With his
On the
arms
operating
out.
table.
Yeah.
I didn't.
And
I was
what-
just sort of like, got it. But now that you're bringing these things up, that has maybe more significance.
Well,
Pete,
and what if anything do we get out of that surgery and his injury but stigmata?
Right. Yes.
It is his hands that were actually, wrought from him.
And Pete, I don't know if these are direct answers to your question of whether or not the Marvel movie needs a director, but I think it's interesting to talk about all these specific connections to, sort of what Derrickson believes and who he is as a person, and how that could be involved in the way that he's making this movie.
No, in fact, I think this conversation actually cements that for me. Like, yes, the Marvel cinematic universe benefits from having directors that are not afraid to put at least some sort of even a subversive stamp in some cases on their films. But in this case, obviously, there's a lot more going on, and I think it ends up being a pretty powerful message.
That might be what separates Marvel from DC.
Yes.
Could be a thing
possibly.
for sure. Well, and we
shall
think about
see.
the occult being a possible controversy that could come up in the popularity of this film. The whitewashing piece has already been something that people have talked about as well, specifically in regards to Tilda Swinton being cast as the Ancient One. I was wary of it before the film.
Is the Ancient One like a real character in the comic books? Of course.
Yes.
It is. What am I talking
Yes.
about? Okay.
And
and he is usually Asian.
Well,
the point?
Hold on. I read about this because it's something that I'm really sort of, I don't want to say aware of or conscious of. It's like, why does it become an issue? And this one becomes infinitely more complicated, I think, because from what I've read, the Ancient One originally was a Tibetan character. So China does not have a very good relationship with Tibet. So to have the Ancient One to be a Tibetan, that movie's not going to play in China at all. And that is
interesting. And Hong Kong is one of the three most important places in the world for this film.
Yes, exactly. So they changed it, and from my understanding was they changed it to say the Ancient One isn't a specific person, but a title that could be carried by any one of different people. And this person that currently has the title of Ancient One is a Celtic. So that's how they got Tilda Swinton's character in there. It's a title, not a individual. So she is the Ancient One for now. Someone else will come in to fill in that title later on. And there were other Ancient Ones before her who held that title. And that's how they were able to rationalize that change from a Tibetan character, but my understanding is it had a lot more to do with contemporary politics and financial interests.
That's so interesting. I had no idea it would be about financial things. I was wary of it coming in because it was very clear in the books what they were trying to do, but I think that's an easy transition when you talk about that, especially when you think about the role of the title of the Ancient One, supposed to be genderless and sort of without attachment and more of a spiritual being than a human being as well. So in general, I don't have problems with it, but I think that the controversy is not misplaced. I think bringing that up and sort of addressing the whys about casting the people the way they do, I think that's important here.
You know, I think it's actually really interesting. There was a wonderful, and Steve, I don't know if this is one of the articles you were talking about, but the Daily Beast has an article from a couple of days ago with an interview with Derrickson talking about this, and you get two things out of this piece. First is he couldn't win. Right? Because
Totally.
there is such a crazy, there is already a crazy stereotype around characters named the Ancient One that it was a thing that he knew he was going to have to approach. And in fact, he says that they actually decided, was the very first decision he made was to make it a woman. Before we ever went to draft, before we ever had a script, I thought it was interesting to not only make it a woman, but let's find a woman with some maturity, not a 26-year-old leather-clad fanboy dream girl. Let's make a real female actor in there. There was a desire for diversity in making that decision.
Good work, Mr. Derrickson.
I think so too. I really want to celebrate that. But then the fact that we have this Tibetan issue, I think you bring up a great point around the financial decisions around this and the politics of film in the East. But the fact is, he does come back around and says, I know this is. I walked into it. I couldn't win. I absolutely acknowledge that this is hard. Diversity is the responsibility of directors, and I took that as seriously as I could. Whitewashing, if you use the term the way it's used now, it's what I did with The Role. But it also implies racial insensitivity, and it implies racist motives, and I don't think I had either. I was really acting out of what I still feel is the best possible choice, but it's like I choose the lesser evil, and just because you choose the lesser evil doesn't mean you're not choosing an evil.
He sounds like an awesome guy.
Yeah,
he's
that was
definitely
really
Can we get him
really
on the show?
Impressive. Yeah, right. He's certainly
Do you want me to
on
call
my
him?
best.
I'll call him. You
best
guys keep
friend.
going.
Hang on, keep going. He actually, I think I love the way he approached it and sort of addressed it sort of politically, but also, kind of taking the side of diversity in the first place. And that's an awareness that you rarely see, I think, a director take such an active role in publicly.
Can I speak to Scott, please? Scott. Oh, wait. Oh, no, I just called a Papa John's. All right, let's keep going. I'll figure it out.
But I think it gets to the point of what, it's about story first. And yes, there's the other political and financial interests, but what he's talking about there is how to make this story work well, to do something with the character of the Ancient One from a comic book from back in the 60s. How do you bring that into, 2016 to make this something that's going to stand up and have some weight to it when you're now in, an era where you've got, broadly diverse audiences who have also seen a lot of these movies, and we've even become sort of, I guess, skeptical about origin stories of like, yeah, we've seen it before. How to keep things fresh, and I think, oh my gosh, if you had told me this, if you had just listed this cast 3 years ago and said, oh, we got Benedict Cumberbatch, we got Tilda Swinton, we got Chewie, we got Mads Mikkelsen. Oh, by the way, it's a Marvel movie. I would have said, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, because of the pedigree of the cast.
The pedigree of the cast. And I looked at this and I was like, oh, wait, where have I seen these two guys before? Oh, yeah, back in 12 Years a Slave. And then I was like, okay, everybody in that movie's gone on to be in some type of superhero or science fiction movie. It's just The Thing now. So there's so many of them. I mean, there's like 4 or 5 like outer space movies coming up. It's like The Thing now. You've got Arrival and Passengers and Life and God Particle. It's like, we've got so many of these to keep it fresh, to bring in a cast of this pedigree, but to sort of subvert expectations in service of the story. I mean, that's why I think this works so well. It does the typical, archetypical hero's journey, but it did it in a way where it was always fresh for me.
Yep.
I knew where I was going. I was comfortable. I felt safe in his hands, even in the oh my gosh, we're in New York and skyscrapers are bending and twisting in on themselves. Do we know where we are? I felt safe knowing that I could go with where this was going, and I would understand where we were.
Yeah, and it's been a viable subgenre for a while, but not for the pedigree that we're talking about. And I think you bring up a really interesting point that this cast was assembled in a really interesting way, and I think they all brought really, really strong things that we haven't seen in other superhero movies.
I do think it's important, just to wrap up this whitewashing thing, it's important at least to recognize that there are two issues here, or obviously multiple issues, but the other big one that has been floated certainly by the Asian community of actors is it's hard enough to find great roles for an Asian actor. Like, there aren't enough of them anyway. And to put Tilda Swinton into a role that feels like such an obvious get for a talented Asian actor is really hard to stomach for a large group of professionals and their audience. And I feel like I recognize that from the stance of being entertained. I thought Tilda Swinton was fantastic. I adore her generally, and I love seeing her take on such diverse roles as this compared to her role in Snowpiercer. I mean, she's just an amazingly talented individual, and I think she did some incredible stuff with it. So, politically, I totally get it, and I feel that pain, though I don't. I could never understand it in that way. I was also entertained and think she did a great job.
And that's why the Derrickson quote you gave hits home so well.
Yeah.
Because it's like he looked at all the different things that could be important to the cast politically, financially, whatnot, realized that there was no way to win, so he went with what worked. And I think it did.
Arguably, just because it's more diverse. It looks more diverse by not having him taken in by just a complete hostel of stereotyped Asian educators.
Big Trouble in Little
instead
China.
Right? It just appears more diverse, and that to me is a good thing.
I think ideally we do not want to cast an Asian actor as the Ancient One. I'm looking towards race blind casting.
Right.
Where any of those other characters can be. So what you're saying is that there's this very strong, mystical, Asian-ish character, and that should be a prime role for them. I think it should be something else.
And in fact, they made it the joke, right? And they the way he talks about it is when we first walk into the Ancient Ones,
we think it's Stubby Magoo. Yeah,
the complete stereotype with the stereotypical mustache and the glasses, and it wasn't, and they played off of that, I think. So whether that was funny.
That's something that we've heard about for a long time, right? I mean, wasn't that the Lucy Liu argument way back during the Charlie's Angels things? Is that she wanted to play roles that weren't just Asian roles. She wanted to play roles that were for everyone. And that, I mean, Pete, your point about diversity is we see it when we cast it, as opposed to falling into a stereotypical cast. I think that's super.
Same
smart.
with Aziz Ansari. There's a lot of actors that are putting their sort of stake in the ground, saying that I don't want to be. For Aziz Ansari, he didn't want to be technical support.
Right.
So we've talked about Benedict. We've talked about Tilda. What did you guys think of Chewie? And I want to say Chiwetel Ejiofor. Did I say that right, Pete?
Ejiofor. That's what I understand. I'm the worst with names, so I'm not the one to ask.
Well, and
that's
I think
you're the worst with names.
Let me tell you, I am.
I thought your name was until tonight. I thought your name was Jeff. It's
25 years we've known each other, and I think I'm Jeff.
Yeah.
Most people think I'm Steve. Let me tell you about Chiwetel Ejiofor. How great was this movie that in the post-credit stinger,
oh my gosh,
we see that this movie was in fact the prequel to Serenity, and his character is the operative.
Love it.
It's the origin story of him becoming the Nemesis.
Right, Baron Mordo.
And that's all we need to know.
Yeah. The name of the character is the Nemesis?
No. Baron Mordo is the name of the
character. No, Tom, it's not the Nemesis. Of course, it's Aaron Mordo. Everyone knows Aaron Mordo. That runs off the tongue. Whatever.
Baron Mordo.
Baron Mordo, that makes even less sense. I would like if it was more like Carl Mordo. All right, keep going.
I just really like that he was here, and such as an actor that I give quite so much significance as I do. I think he's one of my very favorites, and
Me too.
to see him in a role that he is now, he feels so much embedded in this universe, and because I know they're gonna make so many of these movies, I love that he's in this chapter. I just feel like he's the guy we deserve to see in these movies.
I agree with that because I like him so much. Otherwise, I'd like to pick and choose characters. Or I would like the next film to be Thanos wins. And we all move on.
Well, and I like that his role is going to be the bad cop, right? He's going to be the cop for natural law going forward. He's creating a whole dynamic philosophical argument in his role with the universe, and I think that's great. I think there's great story fodder that comes out of this movie because of Chewie's character.
As his archetype, he's like the mystical Punisher.
Ooh, love it.
Well, and then for me to sort of pull on threads, sort of metaphysically and spiritually, what these characters represent, you've got Stephen Strange, who knows that sometimes you have to break the rules, and whereas you've got Mordo there, who is basically the fundamentalist who says this is the way it is and there is no negotiation, there is no compromise. And that dynamic, I think, is really interesting to see where they may go with that story, because I think that can resonate a lot with a lot of conflicts that are going on in our country today, of those that can say, well, it's right to do it this way this time, but sometimes you've got to be flexible in your interpretation of something versus, no, it's carved in stone, it's fixed, we can't change it. Which I think is a very interesting debate and discussion to have. And this is the perfect forum to play that out in this world, because what I love so much about this is an origin story. It's not that we're just in this world. We've got a whole different magical realm that we get to play these things out in. We're not bound by the limits of, contemporary, America. We've got different dimensions and realms where all kinds of craziness.
It's a multiversal soap opera.
Oh my gosh. I have to say, I saw this in IMAX. That whole opening sequence where she's bopping him around different universes was totally worth it for this movie. It was just the most, I was like blown away.
Let's get to the effects.
My head exploded all over the place with, oh my gosh, we're pulling this off. We're hitting people with this so early on. Like, here's a big monologue going on about dimensions and all this stuff and how little you know, and we're just all over the place. And I felt like I could fall into that screen. It was gorgeous.
Well, I think we should talk about effects because the effects were kind of my favorite character. I mean, I'm so glad you saw it in IMAX, Steve. I saw it in 3D, and you guys know that I hate 3D. This movie is 3D candy. I mean, I didn't see Avatar because I'm mildly opposed to James Cameron movies, but honestly, this is the first movie that I've ever seen that I would recommend everybody see it in 3D. It was perfect. I mean, it was mind-blowing to go through probably what you saw in IMAX. I mean, the same sort of thing. For 3D, every effect was kind of perfect for the environment. So I can only imagine what it was like in IMAX. I was
it was IMAX 3.
By it.
It was IMAX 3D that I saw it in. So it was
so great.
Yeah. I would feel like maybe that would be all for that LSD sequence. That would almost be too much.
Oh, it was too much for him.
That's amazing.
Did everybody see it in 3D?
I did, yeah.
I did. I saw it at the RPX with the rumble packs under the seat.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, no, I did. I went all in.
That's funny. Those are called D-boxes out here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Which is a terrible name, but D-boxes.
From
but yeah, those are the ones where you like run around and jump around and stuff.
That's awesome.
This one does it. This just kind of booms this. It's like it's got just like a super bass under the seat. So when things happen that involve like explosions, you shake. But it doesn't like
move around.
Yeah, it doesn't do
like
that.
A lot. Okay, got it.
So when you guys think about this in 3D or with all these effects, do you think, I mean, obviously I'm slanted in the negative sense for all these kind of crazy effects because I tend to be a purist, but because I felt this way about this, because I would recommend people to see that, is it warranted? Do you agree with that?
Oh, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
It's, I mean,
maybe
for when we're in the multiverses, and then when we're in the, what do they call it, the mirror dimension, where that's where the buildings are flipping and folding in and you've got things tessellating all over the place. No, it gives such sense of scope because there's a part during that big chase in New York where they jump off the side of a building and then the shot goes so wide and you see these two little specks sort of falling along the side of a building, and just the grandeur of that is just, it adds that depth to really give a sense of the scale and scope of what he's showing there.
Thinking of me as a novice of 3D, I was thinking that maybe it was just me finally like getting on board. But
No.
I think it's definitely a film that works in 3D in a way that I've never seen before.
I think you don't make this movie without the intention of dropping it in 3D. Given the technology we have today, I think this is a work of art in 3D, and you owe it to yourself to appreciate it as such. I don't think anybody in in making this movie said, "Gosh, the movie's fine in 3D, but really, the first class experience is just going to your regular, cinema." Like the first class experience, to see what the filmmaker saw, I have to imagine you've got to see it big.
I have a mitigating opinion, potentially, which is, JJ, you said your favorite character was the effects, right?
That's how it felt. Yeah.
Yeah, mine was the cape. But yeah, the effects.
That's an effect.
Because it was impossible to not read that the effects were stunning. So I'm willing to say that potentially I was a little bit biased and like, okay, impress me. I loved the effects of the MC Escher stuff, of all of the cities and stuff falling into each other, but I hated, and the reason I'm bringing this up during 3D, there is a reason. I really hated I'm not sure the best way to say it, the spatial relation of the real people to the incredible effects behind them. And
Okay.
I wanted to see if you guys felt this way. It felt incredibly green screened. It felt like whenever they sort of leaped from one thing to one other part or one other element, that the background looked great. They looked incredibly fake. Terrible wire work, kind of CGI, not CGI, green screen kind of thing. And it took me out of it. And I was wondering if that was exacerbated by the 3D, which by definition takes really distance the background from the foreground, meaning the background from the character.
Well, I think my enthusiasm might be because I was so focused on the effects. I mean, the one place where I definitely agree with you about that point is when Strange is sort of floating off from Hong Kong into the Dormammu universe.
That
where
looked like a first draft effect.
It really felt like something from the late 70s, where I was like, oh, he's
so
just kind of...
So did the opening set piece, the opening fight. That
Yeah.
when they started going crazy, I felt that the environment looked amazing. People in that environment looked super fake and kind of like the 70s. Did Pete, Steve, did you guys feel that way at all?
Nope.
Wow, fair enough.
Nope.
All right.
I just enjoyed it. That initial fight, I thought it was a really bold move to have all that craziness go on without having any dialogue at all to explain where the heck they were or why buildings were doing weird things and why there's like invisible crystal wall crack things going on. I mean, it was just, they threw us into it and I just went with it. And visually there wasn't anything that took me out of it. I think there may be a couple times where it's like, okay, that was probably a CG version of Tilda Swinton jumping off of that building from 2 stories up or something, but that's a given in any of these things. But it was not anything that became a distraction or took me out of the action.
I guess for me to finally beat a dead horse for my opinion is there was there's definitely obviously a comparison to the movie Inception for this movie.
For sure.
With the idea of the effects and stuff. The hotel hallway fight in Inception was so thrilling because it was so largely practical. They got rid of the wires and stuff, but you really felt like they were physically in that space, having to jump and having to negotiate that space. There was literally a hallway fight in Doctor Strange, and I felt none of that. I enjoyed the shifting of perspective, but I never believed that any of them were ever in an actual hallway. There was way too much going on, way too many open windows in the background. For me, it just became, that's the kind of CGI stuff that I didn't like.
There was only one sequence that I felt a little twinge of obviousness, which was when it was the final face-off on the round platform.
Oh, I got so nauseous during that part. The New York fight, right?
The New York fight. Well, it
Yeah.
was the start of the New York fight when they're all three kind of facing off, and she's facing off against, Smokey. And I think that in that sequence in particular, there was just like one too many like 3/4 headshot. Like we're looking at them and you can tell that it was
Love
a
it.
fan that was blowing his hair, and it was just a little much. It just felt a little bit much. But that's really the only sequence that kind of took me out of it. As soon as they fell off that platform and were falling through the illusion and running along the buildings, I actually got totally lost in it. And one of the things I always try to look at is how do their feet, and there were a number of close-ups of feet, like footfalls on sides of buildings that I'm always just sort of aware of. Does it feel like there's a sense of great contact, of physical contact? And I didn't find myself questioning any of those elements at all. In fact, one of the very first effect sequences of the film is the Ancient One's foot landing on the side of a building. It's a nice close-up, and you see her walking on this sort of embankment side of a building, and it looks really good. Like it looks like great contact and no wobble or anything.
Fair enough.
Well, and I think that makes sense, Tom. I mean, honestly, like in general, you're usually a little bit more sensitive to those things than others.
Yeah.
And to bring up Inception, which is, I mean, even the filmmakers, when they talk about what they're doing here in Doctor Strange, they were acutely aware of the similarities to the effects that they're doing in terms of the cityscapes to Inception. And Inception, I mean, I'm a big fan, and I kind of feel like it's a masterclass on that sort of thing, where I don't think Doctor Strange gets that far, but I think it did a pretty good job.
I also think Doctor Strange did more, just
Well,
in terms
it's
of
a much-
strictly the
It's
number.
a much bigger palette. It's a much
Yeah.
bigger world. And maybe I'm willing to absolutely concede that maybe that's where with the fake things jumping on fake things, which is my dumb catchphrase. But the idea is that I love a good hotel hallway. Maybe when you have it going up a entire skyscraper, maybe that's just my personal feeling. That's where I start to lose interest. Fair enough.
That's fair. Pete, you said you saw it in RPX. Is that something like Atmos? Is there special sound coming out at you that way?
I don't think so. It's just the Regal Cinemas, their new like giant screen. It's from what I understand, it's not an IMAX projection, but it's essentially an IMAX size or a Limax size screen. So it's the largest screen.
Oh, it's
that
like
is
fake
not
IMAX? That's
It's
funny.
but it's not even that, because it's not even projected in pseudo IMAX, right? I mean, it's really a regular 4K digital projection on a giant screen with really comfy seats. But it was big, and that's what counts.
Because we have a question on our Slack channel about what some specific things that could have worked in an interesting way for Atmos on this.
Unfortunately, you can't get picture and sound. It's like you get either IMAX, but they don't do Atmos there. And the theater I have nearby that does Atmos, I mean, it is a large screen, but it's not IMAX, and they don't do 3D in there. So,
That's $1 billion integration right there.
yeah, exactly.
do
And the IMAX I see.
I'm on it. I'll make a call.
Yeah, this was true IMAX. This was an old nature documentary IMAX. The screen is the size of the side of the building, so everything was gigantic. But I think I could imagine in Atmos, because there's a lot of things in those different dimensions, and you've got the sparks that are going all over the place. There could be some really interesting, sound play going on with immersion in those fight scenes.
Steve, for the IMAX, did it give you the full frame for the full movie?
Oh, yeah, full
yeah?
movie, yeah.
Oh, unlike The Dark Knight,
which drives me batty,
which
so
is
to speak.
nice. Like every once in a while, it was
Yeah.
that, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's interesting that they did that. I mean, that works really well, and that's going to highlight the effects in a way that is super special. So we all saw the Great Picture movie. It'd be interesting to hear what the Great Sound movie is like as well. As far as the music, I've seen a lot of criticism of the lack of a theme, but when the end credits rolled and we got the heavy theme, I thought it was really strong. Did you guys notice that?
I did.
Totally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was one of the more powerful themes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as of yet.
but I didn't remember it in the movie,
Right.
Right.
But
which
when
is
it-
maybe a testament to the visual effects.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, yeah, and I'm actually seeing it tomorrow again. I'm taking the kids finally,
Nice.
and yeah, I know I'm a
Whose
sweetheart.
kids? Yours?
Whoever's out there.
Got it.
And I've been listening to it throughout the day, the soundtrack, and it is or the score, and it's fantastic. And that theme is everywhere, and it's one of Michael Giacchino's really good ones. I wouldn't say it's his best, but it's certainly a really good one.
Is he a big Marvel guy? Where do we know his work from?
Well, he's J.J. Abrams Disney. I mean, he got started with J.J. Abrams, and so now that everything J.J. Abrams, I think, is with Star Wars, which is owned by Disney, and I think
Okay, he's the go-to.
He's the go-to guy, I think, on the Disney stuff because he's done. I don't know how many of the Marvel ones he's done, but yeah, he's all over the place. I think he's, I don't know, heir to John Williams in some ways. I think he's just all
sure.
He's all
this next generation.
He's all over, and he's just consistently
And
solid.
I'll tell you, on that point, you should listen to the Star Trek 2009 Star Trek main theme. Da 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 da. Right, it's fantastic. It is great. And then listen to this, and you'll start seeing the old John Williams. John Williams ripping off his own stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh, really?
He's
Okay.
finally Giacchino has finally done enough that he's starting to rip off his own stuff, and it's great. It's all great stuff. Like, God willing, one day I have this problem.
Yeah.
Well, and
Sure.
and that was the criticism that I heard, right? Is that people saw this and thought Star Trek, because he also did Star Trek Beyond and other things that he's done. He did Jurassic World, which we all saw.
Yep.
And then he's going to be doing Rogue One for us next
Yeah.
month too.
Yeah.
So we're going to become very familiar with him ripping off his own themes, and maybe we'll be able to name it and sing it like Pete just did next month.
And the theme in Star Trek or in Star Wars, the Rogue One. I mean, the trailer music is beautiful. If that is anything, any piece of the score that he's written, we have a lot to look forward to.
Yeah. No, I think so too. I'm excited for all that. Speaking about excited for next things, what does this do for you? We talked a little bit about how the cliffhanger got us excited to go with the Infinity Stones. Do we need to talk about that more? Thor is next. Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Oof. The Thors, I mean, I'm about to step out of this part of the conversation. The Thors are the worst for me because they're the most crazy. They're the most Independence Day 2 versus Independence Day 1, meaning like dealing with real stuff versus flying around on craziness.
Okay, so but this is key. So you shouldn't walk out on this conversation just yet, because now you have Doctor Strange. So I recognize that you guys
okay.
all feel that way about the Thor movies, which I actually particularly like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And now we have the Doctor Strange movie, which did a lot of that fake stuff, right? But did it better, potentially, based on our conversation here. So now you have the cliffhanger with the two of them together saying, let's go do this together. Does that get you more excited at all to go see Thor Ragnarok?
If it takes place in a real city.
Ooh,
Well, it's going to
The
take.
problem with Thor is they take place in alien parts.
that's fair.
It's
And I personally, just me, I don't care.
Well, it sounds like it's New York because that's the whole reason for this little scene is that Doctor Strange has sort of been tracking,
Loki.
dangerous people. And he says, hey, you brought Loki here. What's going on? So Thor has brought Loki to New York. They're looking for Odin in New York for some reason. So I'm expecting there may be a few pieces but in other dimensions, just as we had here. But I'm expecting that a good chunk of the story's got to take place here in New York, at least the beginning, because I'm curious as to whether that scene is similar to what we saw at the end of Ant-Man, where we were actually seeing a scene from Civil War. Is that little clip actually from the beginning of the Thor Ragnarok film?
So Ant-Man was really, because I couldn't end up seeing Ant-Man because of my horrible phobia of the dumbest thing in the world. But Ant-Man seems like such a weird crutch for what we're talking about. That's so interesting. I've never seen it.
Crutch.
So-
Yeah. Why do you mean crutch?
Not crutch is the wrong word. A crucial part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is
Interesting that
And
they would put that into Ant-Man.
Well, and that's the thing. So the thing that you didn't see is this whole thing about they don't call it the God particle in Ant-Man, but that's what's in my brain right now. That brings the microverse into context. Which now, so that's the going from inside out to what we discovered from outside in Doctor Strange. So does feel like an essential piece, and I was totally confused why they were going to make Ant-Man when they made Ant-Man. But now, considering what they're doing with the Infinity Stones and going to this sort of grand sort of end game, the last phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe for what it exists today, it seems very natural. And it actually kind of, this feels, Doctor Strange to me felt like a jigsaw puzzle that I was missing before I saw it.
Yeah. No, I think it's really another pivot point to the next sort of story arc within this Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's really brought in, just as the Thor movies, sort of my issue with the first two Thor movies was, as a way to introduce these weird, Infinity Stone things or whatever, and they just were really helping move the plot and bring some things in that were causing complications for the rest of the stories to react to. Whereas this one now, I feel like is really sort of, we've crossed a threshold now of bringing the larger scope to all these stories. We're now starting to move outside New York. We saw that at the end of Civil War, where we're in with the Black Panther film. We're moving outside. We're gonna have a story set completely outside of New York, where a lot of these movies have taken place. So we're really cracking open the cinematic universe and expanding the scope of the stories.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I'm excited for it, and it definitely re-energized me towards the universe. I was starting to get into that stale thing. The theater that I was in, now there wasn't a whole lot of people there, and it might just because I'm always seeing the late show on Friday night of the theater. But I kind of expected this one to be a little bit better attended. What did you guys have in your theaters?
I saw a 10 a.m. show on Friday morning, and it was mostly full.
Oh,
with
that's
the exception of
wow.
the very, very front two rows. Yeah, it was all jammed again with the nerds that work at home like me, I guess.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a bunch of people playing hooky from Intel. That's pretty much where I live.
How about you, Tommy? What about LA?
Saw it today at 3:15 p.m. It was a good 2/3 full in a very big screen, and that was at 3. So, I mean, most people see movies at night like normal people.
Yeah, Steve, your theater, was it full?
Well, it was 9:30 a.m. Saturday morning, and again, it was huge. I don't know how many seats, so a huge auditorium,
With the IMAX, yeah.
with the IMAX. But I'd say we were probably 2/3 full. I mean, I was surprised how full it was at 9:30 on a Saturday morning. So it's the numbers it's been pulling in. It's going to be a big weekend for this one. I've heard it's been tracking to pull in somewhere close to 80 million this weekend.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah.
That's pretty great.
Huge, especially because it's Doctor Strange.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know what's funny about that, Tommy? I wanted to make a comment about you and your Thor phobia. I actually find, goodness, I attached to the whole multiverse craziness much better than I ever attached to Asgard.
Sure.
What's
The
Asgard?
Rainbow Bridge. What is that?
Heaven
Like,
to the Scandinavians.
No. I get it, but in the Thor universe, like I never was able to rationalize why Thor is an Avenger. It seems so stupid to me.
Oh, you're
Whatever
agreeing
I
with
think
me.
about. Yes,
Oh,
I'm
I
on your
thought for some
side
reason
here.
you were coming at me, and I was like, "What's Asgard? How dare
man.
you?" Yeah, totally. I love the
No, I
idea of a
never got
multiverse.
it.
Is fascinating. A
Yeah.
weird rainbow-colored universe filled with like dumb fake mansions. I don't care about at all. So I agree with
Yeah.
you. Great. I'm glad that I
agreement.
stopped you talking to yell over you, saying thanks for agreeing with me. I'm good at conversations. Let's keep going.
Well, now we busted through everything we were going to talk about really quick. Well, not really quickly, but we ran through a lot of stuff. Are there other things that you guys want to talk about that we maybe didn't touch on with this?
I was going to say, the only thing I was super excited was I'm a huge Pink Floyd fan. You never hear any of their music in movies that I can recall, maybe just one or two times. So to pull sort of something out of the deep cuts. So when the music that plays when he's getting all dressed up to go out to his event and everything during the car, when he's in the car, is a track called Interstellar Overdrive, which is off Pink Floyd's first album. So we're talking early Syd Barrett psychedelic rock days. So it's just not a song that's, one of their most popular ones that it's not like gets radio airplay. But if you're going to pick, a song for a movie that's going to take you into a weird mind trippy place, that's the song to pick. And it just, as soon as that started, I was just like, they had me. I was like, somebody.
When did that play? I'm not smart enough to know.
That's early on, before he has the car accident, when he's getting dressed, putting on his watch,
really?
and all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and there's a ton of things about Pink Floyd that connect to Doctor Strange, actually, which is kind of interesting. There's a Saucer Full of Secrets, I guess, is a Pink Floyd album where they actually use Doctor Strange art on it. So there are connections from that, and I think it's interesting that we talk about how, as a audience, we connect with different types of mysticism, right? So I is kind of joking, but in actuality, the idea of Asgard is the mythical heaven for Scandinavians, whereas this idea of the multiverse is something that Marvel developed early in, I believe it was in the 60s, right? With these comics that connected with a whole different group of people. And so you see how they connect with Pink Floyd. They actually wrote a song called Cymbeline that actually referenced Doctor Strange too. So you think about all of the music and all of the artists in the world that are picking up comic books as literature and actually sort of connecting it to their trippy beliefs in what's going on in the world. And I think that's really great that you bring that up, Steve, because that shows sort of where the popularity for something that seems so out there in terms of Doctor Strange, where it hits. And I think there is a group out there that does connect to the multiverse in ways that they might not connect to the other stuff that's comic booky.
I have two little things. Number one, I enjoyed I think for me it was the new, much longer Marvel, what's it called? Beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Intro. Yeah. When it just goes on and on and on. You're seeing all those things, and I just wanted at the end to be like, Marvel Studios, we own everything. I wanted them to like scream that and just be like, get ready, we're not going anywhere. And then the only other thing is I saw this film with JJ and I's good friend Darnell Smith, and we wanted one montage in the film to go longer. We thought it was funny. I don't know if you guys will, but the one where he's like still dealing with shaky hands in the beginning, and he's like trying to sign his name and he can't do it. No, and he's trying to like shave and he can't do it. No, we wanted to be like he's finally like he's trying to finish writing like a message of icing on a cake, and it gets everywhere. He's like, no! And then Darnell's version was he's like finally like in a Jenga tournament, and he's like, no! We wanted that to go over to like how many different situations with someone with shaky hands could have, and we went back and forth. Those were my two favorite.
He's trying to pet a feral cat. No, yeah,
exactly.
No. Yeah, that would be awesome.
No! Yeah.
Well, I think those are both totally relevant. And I think it may be time for us to rank it.
Just Strange is gonna save the day. Doctor Strange is gonna wave his shaky hands around. Cumberbatches, Magic Dr. Hatch. Cumberbatches, American accent kinda let me down. Now it's time to rank it on Flickchart. Da-da-dum-dum, da-da-dum-dum-dum, da-da-dum-dum. On Flickchart, da-da-dum-dum, da-da-dum-dum. That was worth it. All right. I got in a very Bowie mood. Sorry that took so long.
You must have really liked this film.
Apparently. Little
Flick
mash.
meters off the charts.
Well, our special Flickchart stack ranking for all the movies we've talked about on the film board can be found at flickchart.com/TNR Film Board. So go there to play along and ridicule our selections, rankings, and other foibles. Start your own account and let us know how your rankings compare to ours. All right, where do we start?
Doctor Strange versus The Dark Knight Rises.
Strange-o.
Is that the third one?
Yes.
Yes.
Doctor Strange.
Strange.
I know I ask that every time,
Cute
but it's
Tommy
never going
question.
to change.
Next one up, Doctor Strange versus Captain America Civil War.
Ooh, Captain America for the win.
Yeah, Civil War. Yeah.
I'd say Doctor Strange.
Really?
I'm on Doctor Strange.
Ooh.
We have a tie. What do we do?
We have a tie. Somebody's
Foster?
got to do rock, paper, scissors.
Okay,
Spark fight!
Pete, you do it with Steve.
All right.
All right.
Steve, are you ready?
So rock, paper, scissors. So 1, 2, 3, and then...
1, 2, 3, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Ready?
Yep.
1, 2,
3.
Scissors.
Oh. Okay, Doctor
Pete
Strange
wins.
wins.
Yes, sweet victory.
Moving on.
Here's another interesting one, given some of our back channel conversation in Slack this week. Doctor Strange versus The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Oh.
The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Doctor Strange.
Ooh, so much Rochambeau coming.
I'm on the fence. I think I'm going to have to be Doctor Strange on this one too. I think JJ and Tommy.
Okay, Tommy, you ready?
Ready.
1,
2, 3.
Paper.
Scissors.
Okay. Wait a
Always
minute.
go
We were
scissors.
both Man from
They
Uncle.
were both Man from Uncle. What are you talking about?
Wait. We just ruined the easiest game to play in the world. No one messes up Rochambeau, and we did it. That's like losing at solitaire.
Oh man!
All right, so
All right.
Pete, why don't
Who do
you
we
try,
do it
Tommy?
again?
All right, I'll go. Tommy, you ready?
saying it, yeah. 1.
Yeah. Okay.
And here we go. And 1, 2, 3.
Rock.
Scissors.
I
Nice.
crush you.
You
So
win.
Strange wins again. Let's move on.
Okay, this one, I feel like I know where we're going to go. Doctor Strange versus Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge of Tomorrow.
Ooh, Edge of Tomorrow. 1,000%.
Yeah.
Live, die, repeat.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Try it again.
Doctor Strange versus Kingsman: The Secret Service.
Kingsman.
I'm Kingsman on this one
Okay.
too. Steve.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh no.
No, we have 3.
No.
I'm Kingsman as well. So
Oh, as Steve
Dr.
votes for Ross Perot. His vote is taken away into the universe.
How about Doctor Strange versus Guardians of the Galaxy?
ooh.
Guardians for me, Tommy.
I think it's Guardians for me too.
I enjoy both of them, but because I think of the personal story arc of Stephen Strange has more weight to it, that I think, although Guardians is lighter and fun, I think there's more personal growth you get out of Strange and his story. So I'm going to go with Doctor Strange.
Wow.
I like that opinion. That makes sense.
I have to tell you, I'm Doctor Strange too.
Okay,
course you
so
are.
Steve, you and I are going to do Rochambeau, and we're going to make this work. Okay, you ready?
Okay, and we'll do that on our next trailer rewind. So see you then, folks.
Tune in, folks.
Yeah. Here we go.
Yeah.
1, 2,
3,
Scissors.
paper. Damn. Okay,
right.
JJ wins.
that's fine.
Kingsman.
Yeah. What?
Wait, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Sorry, that's what I meant. Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
That one, yes.
Child 44? What?
Wow, you guys, this is not a bad play. That puts it at number 7.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Charge?
Oh, really?
And
That's very high.
I
All
think
right, fair
that's
enough.
juiced by some strange rock, paper, scissors, but I don't mind it. I think it was a good film.
That sticks it right between The Martian and The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Okay.
There's
Interesting.
Interesting because we've got some common cast members with The Martian. You had Chewie and Wong.
That's
We're
true.
both in The Martian.
That's interesting. That is great.
I
Yes.
hadn't thought about that.
Took me a second to catch up with you.
Yeah.
There. That's absolutely right.
My ranking for this on Letterboxd is 4 stars.
I'll say 2.5. That seems rude. 3.
3 for Tommy.
3.
I will go with 4.
For Pete.
I am also a 4.
Excellent.
Good numbers.
12,
Good
15,
numbers.
carry the 6. That's basically going to put us at a 4 if we're rounding up. Because that's a pretty solid film. And that makes sense because we have it at number 7 on our flick chart. So that's very good. Where do we go from here? Next month, we have a Christmas treat with Rogue One. Did you guys have the Rogue One trailer with Doctor Strange?
No.
We did.
Yes, and I closed my eyes.
Oh.
And I haven't seen a
Oh.
thing, so I have
That's
no
super.
idea.
Okay, then we're not going to
All
talk
I want to
about it.
say is it's glorious.
It's going to be
Really?
great.
glorious.
I had questions that I wanted
Did I
to
tell
talk
you-
about,
I-
but we don't have to because Steve doesn't want to know. What was your...
I had the trailer for The Great Wall starring Matt Damon.
Yes.
And I am no longer interested in that film.
Me neither.
I thought it was a historical epic. I didn't know it was involved with like dragons and nonsense.
Right.
But
You
I'll see
know,
if
it's
you guys
actually
want
an
me to.
adaptation, Tommy. You should read the book, a short story.
From what? The Bible?
Or it's like a novella. No, it's legit. We actually we did it as a trailer pick. It's got backstory, baby.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually an allegory about British trade. I don't think they caught that with the movie.
Oh, okay. All
We'll
right.
see.
So it's not Godzilla Goes to China?
Can my new nickname be Backstory Baby?
I love you guys. This has been great. It was actually a really solid movie and a nice reintroduction to Marvel. So I'm excited to talk with you guys next month in another Disney vein with Star Wars. Good night, Pete.
Good night, JJ.
You're the best, Steve.
Oh, you're the best, JJ.
No. Tommy, I will see you soon.
You complete me.
I'm JJ, and you are all so awesome for hanging out with us tonight. Till next.
One, two, three. Rock. Okay, this is good podcasting. Here we go. Let's speed it up. Ready to go. One, two, three. Scissors.
Scissors.
Okay.
Yes, one of these is getting cut. Ready? Here we go.
Okay, ready to go. One, two, three. Obama. All right. You already said you were cutting it. Here we go. Come on, take this seriously. Podcasting. Here we go. Ready? For real. Here we go. Ready? And one, two, three. Scissors.
Let's get the rhythm down. Let's get the rhythm down.
So it's Should we?
Yeah,
you hear this clapping?
we need a click track. We need a.
Here we go. Can you hear that?
Oh yeah.
One.
Ready?
Two and one.
One, two, three.
Yeah. See, I think there's a delay. I don't think it's. I think.
No. That was just me. So you're doing 1, 2, 3. Right?